Tonight on Real News from the Blaze, we're talking about China. Buck, fill us in.
It looks like the Chen Guangchen crisis could in fact be over, or at least there's a resolution on the table that would involve him studying in the U.S., actually right here in New York City. So we're going to unpack how the U.S. handled this thing and what it looks like going forward. We have a fantastic expert to help us do that.
Sounds good. All that and much more on Real News from the Blaze coming up in just 60 minutes.
This is not going to be about politics. This is about principles. We're going to take it upon ourselves to be part of the solution.
We are going to restore history, restore our honor, restore his idea that character is what matters.
Let us not lose this battle because we sat down.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck Program and to the network that you're building, GBTV. There's so many things going on in our world today that are overwhelming that I don't even know where to begin. We told you about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, the plan was to overwhelm the system. I don't know about you, but my system's overwhelmed. But I saw a piece on television a couple of weeks ago, and I immediately wrote to Tiffany, our executive producer, and said, we have a show to do. This is kind of a personal one, but I think a wildly important one. It goes to what I said to you earlier this week about I refuse to go over the cliff with the rest of humanity. That's what a little old lady told me when I went to Poland, to Auschwitz last summer. I said, what is the secret? She was one of the righteous among the nations. I said, what's the secret? How do we get people to not do this to people? She said, 1, God. 2, remember, the righteous didn't suddenly become righteous. They just refused to go over the cliff with the rest of humanity. We're headed towards a cliff. And there are far too many of our neighbors that don't have any idea of the dangers of what is happening right now. Most people don't even know what has happened throughout history. History repeats itself. It is our job to remember, teach it to our children, and then look for the warning signs. I guess we just assume that when really awful things happen historically, they just sort of spontaneously erupted into major catastrophes, but it doesn't happen like that. It always starts small, and society goes over the cliff. You might be surprised to learn that some of the worst movements in human history, at least in the 20th century, had their roots right here in America. Eugenics. Horribly, horribly evil. Started in 1907. Indiana passed the first eugenics compulsory sterilization law in the world. The ruling, thank goodness, was overturned in 1921. This is a movement that is now wildly associated with the Nazis. But it started here. And it was well established and accepted here before we helped move it to Nazi Germany. We've shown you this piece of video before, but it's stunning because everybody's like, oh yeah, he's a great playwright. George Bernard Shaw. No, he's an evil, evil man. George Bernard Shaw heavily promoted eugenics. Watch this.
Must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. Just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social vote, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use to yourself.
I remember when we found that film, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. By 1926, America was funding German eugenics institutions. Margaret Sanger was right there. She had founded Planned Parenthood as a way not to help people, as a way to eliminate, quoting, the unfit. She wrote a book in 1920 called Women and the New Race. Sanger wrote in this book nothing more or less than the facilitation of the process of weeding out the unfit, of preventing the birth of defectives or those who will become defectives. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the overfertility of the mentally and physically defective. Sanger was incredibly concerned about eliminating from society, quoting her, morons, imbeciles, defectives, and minorities.
I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
And still people, Americans, our children are being taught that she's not a horrible, horrible monster. She was. Liberals and progressives revere her, and most Americans don't have any idea why. You most likely know about the Special Olympics, but it surprises me how many people, they know that it was started by a Kennedy, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, founded them, but they don't really know why Eunice Shriver founded the Special Olympics. She was inspired. She was a philanthropist. No, I think she was trying to make good for her evil, evil father. She was inspired by her sister Rosemary. But that's not exactly right either. This book, The Sins of the Father, Joseph P. Kennedy and the dynasty he founded. In this book, about halfway through, you'll find the whole story. And I just want to give you a little bit of it because it is amazingly evil. But it shows you the mindset of the elite of the not-too-distant past here in America. Rosemary had always been slower than the other children. As she grew older, her sweet disposition turned sour, and she often flew into uncontrolled and violent rages. Joe couldn't tolerate losers any more than he could tolerate criers. He banned Rosemary from the house. He also consulted two surgeons, one in Washington and the other right outside of Washington, who become leading proponents of prefrontal lobotomies. Newspapers had carried stories about their work, and Joe most likely heard about it through his daughter, Kathleen. Joe decided that the solution was a lobotomy. Lobotomy era had begun in the 1930s when a pair of neurological scientists severed the frontal lobes of chimpanzee brains, rendering them docile and relaxed. So Joe asked the doctors for their help. The book goes on. They performed, at this time, only 66 of prefrontal lobotomies at the time. Nearly all of the lobotomies that were performed at that time were performed by these guys. Here's how the two doctors, Freeman and Watts, did the surgery. In the only interview he ever gave on the subject, Dr. Watts described to the author how he performed the lobotomy in the fall of 1941. After Rosemary was mildly sedated, we went through the top of her head. Dr. Watts recalls, I think she was awake. She had a mild tranquilizer. He said, quote, I made a small incision in the brain through the skull. It was nearly to the front, and it was on both sides. We just made a small incision, no more than an inch. Quoting the book, the instrument Dr. Watts used looked like a butter knife. And what he did is he put it in and swung it up and down and cut the brain tissue. Quote, we put an instrument inside, he said. As Dr. Watts cut through the brain tissue, he would ask her questions. For instance, he would ask her to recite the Lord's Prayer, or sing God Bless America, or count backward. Then we'd make an estimate on how far to cut based on how she responded. When she began to become incoherent, they stopped. I would make the incision. Dr. Freeman would estimate how much to cut as she would talk. He talked to her, and he would say, that's enough. After Joe Kennedy did that to his daughter, he put her in an institution. But not even in Massachusetts. He put her in an institution in Wisconsin. Remove her from the family. That's the inspiration for the Kennedy's family efforts on behalf of the Special Olympics, which Eunice founded in 1968. What a great, great organization coming from such a horrible source. This isn't something from the 1930s or 40s or 50s. It is still happening in our society. And I truly believe we are more apt to go down this evil road again if we are not alerted, if we don't stand fast. We will go over the cliff with the rest of humanity. We know now that the Obama administration has adopted what's called the Complete Lives System. Do not take my word for it. Please look this up. What it means is if you are sick and old or sick and very young, you don't get health care. Ezekiel Emanuel now has done studies about kids with terminal cancer and whether or not you have the right to kill them, because put them out of their misery. Ezekiel Emanuel is the advisor on the complete health care system for the White House. You now have people in America debating if killing a child outside the womb is abortion. What's the first part of that word? Abort. Abort what? The event. You abort the event. There is no abortion outside the womb. The event has happened. It's not abortion. It's now clearly murder. The catalyst for this show is something that I saw on Dr. Phil. He had a woman who wants to, he, I think, used the word euthanized, wants to murder or kill her 2 severely disabled children. And shockingly, the vast majority of the audience supported her. Watch.
If Janet and Jeffrey were able to make a decision about life, they would opt for suicide. There have been times when I thought of doing something myself, but the saying, walk in another man's moccasins, unless you've been there, don't judge.
She's asking for the right to be merciful with her children. I mean, that's what you're asking for. Is that right? Now, you may agree with that, or you may not. And let me ask the audience, before we move on, by a show of hands, if you think it is the moral thing for parents to have the right, when you reach a fatal and
extreme,
irreversible course of a disease, to affirmatively end that child's life, raise your hand.
Oh my God.
All right, and if you say, no, listen, that is murder, it is ending someone's life, raise your hand. Okay. So it looks like about 90-10 support what you want to do.
"25 years ago, this last April, my daughter Mary was born. She was my firstborn. I was for abortion. I was for everything. Had the doctors given me the choice, I probably would have said, oh, well, she's going to be a vegetable her whole life. She had strokes at birth. She has cerebral palsy. She's 25. Next year, she finishes college. She's getting A's and B's. She is amazingly wise and brilliant. She just has a hard time verbalizing it sometimes because of the way her brain is wired. But she pays attention. She wrote me after this, and she said, Dad, I'm worried. Daddy, I'm afraid. What if people decide that I'm not useful?
I said, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in America. But if you frame it right, I guess Americans will go for anything. This is the way it started in ancient Rome. It always starts this way. You don't have to go to Hitler, but I mean, he's the most recent nightmare. Hitler didn't begin saying we have to kill all the Jews. He began sending his own personal physician to examine the pain and suffering of a baby called Baby Nauer. And the people begged for the kind Fuhrer to put him out of his misery because he was born without any limbs and he was blind. And then they proceeded to put another 300,000 mentally and physically handicapped people out of their misery over the years, not to mention the 6 million Jews. America, the question is, will we go over the cliff with the rest of humanity? No is the only answer. So I watched this on Dr. Phil, and the very next morning, I see Annie in the newspaper. Hi, Annie. How are you? You're Annie. Oops, Annie Clark. Come here, Annie. You were in the newspaper for penmanship, right? Come here. We have some big boxes, big chalkboard. Go ahead. Okay, so let me meet the Clark family first. Everybody here has a child of special needs. You two are from Pennsylvania?
Yes.
And I love Amelia. She's sound asleep. I have that effect on people. You two are from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And you want to introduce, Tom, you want to introduce your family?
My name's Tom Clark. My wife is Mary Ellen. And then our oldest is Amanda. Amanda's sitting behind my wife.
Hi, Amanda.
Her husband, Darius.
Hi, Darius.
And then our next one is Amy.
Hi, Amy.
And then our next is Abby.
Hi, Abby.
And then the next is Alyssa.
Hi, Alyssa.
And then there's Tyler at the end of the count.
Tyler.
And then there's Talbot.
Talbot.
And then there's Travis.
Hi. You have an A and a T thing.
Yeah. And then there was Annie, who you just met, and then Amelia's sound asleep.
So, you know what amazes me? Is here's Annie with no hands, and she wins the penmanship contest. Meanwhile, we have people in the streets march around saying, I can't do it. I've been handed a tough, whatever it is. And here's Annie doing it, doing something that most people would say, oh, no. What? Where does that come from? The ability just to do it? Is that something you teach?
No, I don't believe it is something that we teach. I mean, every one of us as individuals have very unique characteristics that God has given to every one of us. And Annie is a very special young lady, and she is very determined. She won that penmanship award with Zahner Bloser on her own.
Come here. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I just have to get a hug from her. You're so sweet. You're so sweet. How old are you?
7.
You're 7 years old. You are really sweet. Thank you.
Annie knows how to swim. She can dress herself.
How long have you been swimming?
She rides a bike.
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And you dress yourself every morning? No big deal, right? I don't even dress myself. So you have adopted children.
Yes.
And have you specifically adopted children of special needs?
Not specifically. We were in the process of adoption, and my social worker told us that China had just opened and that we should call and see if we met the criteria. So I called, and the lady said, there's actually a little boy that's available right now. He's totally healthy, but he's missing his right forearm. Would you be interested? And
how old were you?
I was 17 months.
You were 17 months? Okay.
To us, we just felt like that was no big deal.
Right.
Abby had been born with Down syndrome, and I think we both agree that she really taught us the value of every life, and she was just so incredibly typical to us, and we just felt like, here's a little boy, here's the one God has for us.
I have to tell you, I've learned more from my daughter than any person alive.
Absolutely.
There is, I think we're going to get, you know, we have this definition of retarded. We're going to get to the other side and realize we're the ones.
Amen.
We're the ones.
See, we just had a lot more to learn, so.
Anybody want to talk about what you saw on Dr. Phil here? Okay, we're going to start here when we come back. Stand by.
America may have lost her way, but she hasn't lost her hope.
It's time for the news you're not getting anyplace else.
If I'm wrong, I've got some new skills and some extra food. If they're wrong, then good luck.
GBTV is the only network that would put me on it. We're going.
We live in interesting times, and nobody knows what kind of hardship or disaster is right around the corner, but what we do know for sure is that if you're prepared, you need not fear. Imagine the peace of mind of having a supply of food for you and your family. This is what I did with my wife, and we did it, and I remember sitting down on the stairs of the basement when we finished it, and I was so relieved as a dad, knowing that no matter what was on the horizon, economic problems, natural disasters, job loss, it doesn't matter. We had peace of mind knowing that our family would be okay. And then there was something else. Then I realized I could be of assistance to others if they had a problem. It's the way Americans are supposed to be. It's the way our grandparents did it when they canned food in the summer. It's just high tech now. Foodinsurance.com, foodinsurance.com, or call 1-866-GOT-FOOD. 1-866-GOT-FOOD. The average cost is about $2 an entree. It's convenient, doesn't take a lot of space. Foodinsurance.com. Go there now.
Like you, I would do anything to protect my family. That's why I have food insurance, the emergency food supply that guarantees my family's most basic needs, safe and nutritious food. These high-quality freeze-dried meals last up to 25 years and are compact, affordable, and delicious. Start with a 2-week supply or plan for several months, whatever's right for you. Provide security for your family. Order food insurance today.
If you're a veteran with a 100% service-connected disability and your family has CHAMP VA, here's some important news. With our CHAMP VA supplement, your family can have quality health insurance at very little cost. You earn this health benefit. Why buy private insurance or employers' health plans? CHAMP VA with our supplement gives you complete health coverage.
We also offer TRICARE supplements.
Call 1-800-899-1900.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates.
Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
Okay, so has anybody actually started saving for college yet?
Oh, not me.
No, you got time.
Oh, no, we actually started.
You have?
Really? Sure. We figure you start saving a little now, or you'll borrow a lot later on.
Yeah, but how did you even know where to start?
Oh, I found out about the Gerber Life College Plan.
Call now for free information on the Gerber Life College Plan. It's easy.
It's pretty much worry-free.
Well, how could it be worry-free? What if something happens with the stock market?
No matter what happens, we get guaranteed safe growth.
So when she's ready for college, the money will be there.
And it doesn't take a lot of money to get started.
For as little as $10 a week, you can start saving for college and get guaranteed growth. Just call now.
Oh, it's a life insurance policy, too.
Oh, that's different.
And if she decides not to go to college, there's no penalty, so she can use the money for anything.
We've got to get started.
Yes, we do, because you're going to college.
Call 1-800-892-3073 for your free information. That's 1-800-892-3073.
Coming up on Real News, what's the best word to describe our economy? Stagnant? What do you think, Matt?
Stagnant sounds pretty good to me, Will. We're going to break down what stagnant is tonight, why our economy is stagnant right now after some very stagnant for the third time. Jobs numbers that came out today, our economy looks pretty anemic going forward. We're going to take what our economy is doing right now, compare that to where Japan was. Are we on the same pace of the lost decades just as Japan had?
That's up next on Real News from the Blaze, right after Glenn at 6 o'clock.
I want to go to Lamarck, who raised his hand right away when I said, what do you have to say about the Dr. Phil episode, what you saw happen?
Yeah, I was shocked in some ways when we talked with your producers about the show. I was so glad to hear the take, you guys, that you wanted to come in and cover the story. You know, these kids, they have disabilities, but what we don't talk often enough about is their ability. Our responsibility as parents is not to the disability, but to the ability of the child. And too often I walk into a school and I deal with caregivers and we talk to the teachers, and the teachers' expectations sometimes are so low. I recently walked into a school and there was a young man with a feeding tube. They gave him his liquid lunch and they pushed him into a corner in the nurse's office. And I walked in and I said, show me one other kid in this school system that you feed lunch to and you put into a corner. And too often, I think the sentiment we saw on the Dr. Phil show is something that I see in major systems that should be flourishing. You know, you should be accentuating the ability of our kids. And too often, the expectations are almost zero.
Is it that the expectations are so low, or that people don't want to look, don't want to see, don't want to think? Yes.
Well, I think I feel for this woman on the Dr. Phil show.
Sure.
I think that this is what life is like. This is what tragedy is like when you don't have God. And I think that's a major problem in our country. We're looking for help in every other place. Our son was involved in an auto accident almost 2 years ago, and he's severely brain damaged. He can't talk. He can't move himself. He's dependent on us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I think that God always has a reason for these kinds of things that happen to us. And we've searched our soul. We've searched the scriptures. And I don't know all of God's reason for this. But I feel that one of the reasons God puts the poor and the disabled among us is to make us kinder. And when we don't have the compassion to take care of the least of these, we are in a dangerous place.
How many people think we're in a dangerous place now? That's pretty staggering. Anybody want to comment on that? Why? What are you seeing, Stephen?
I think we have a tendency to evaluate less abled people in the context of what we're capable of and what people around us are capable of, and not in the context of what they're capable of. Our son is 33 years old, and he's less abled than your daughter. But he lives a life of purpose and dignity. And he lives with people less abled than he, and probably as abled as that woman's children. And they live lives of dignity and purpose. Where has humanity fled?
Sherry?
I think the woman was speaking out of selfishness, quite frankly. I can empathize with her feelings of it's difficult. It's hard. Some days I have to say more than one prayer to get out of bed in the morning because it's just difficult. My heart hurts. But all I have to do is remember that smile that comes from pureness, because he doesn't know any anger, and he doesn't know any lies, and he doesn't know the games that people play. Whenever Michael loves me, he loves me purely.
Talk to me a little bit about, I have a good friend who has a child that he's probably now 45 maybe, and mentally about 3, but is just great, but almost on a regular basis would try to choke mom and dad to death. And he'd have this very violent streak. And they get into a car with him, and he would try to choke them. They'd be driving down the highway, and all of a sudden he'd leap and try to choke them to death. And this amazing couple, she's now in her 70s, and she still, once a week, has to throw this man up against the wall and say, back off. And she's about this tall. And she's just phenomenal. But she told me she really went through a hard time because all she was seeing was the tough parts. What about the parents who only see the tough parts?
They don't.
Go ahead.
Sorry, they don't have what they need in their lives, which I believe is God, to turn those problems over to.
That's easier said than, I mean, it's easier said than done. I know it can be done.
Yeah.
But
I think you just have to look harder.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was about to say what you were just describing with the gentleman who, yeah, physically is pretty tough, is similar to our family. My wife and I have 3 daughters. Our oldest is a traditional 15-year-old. She's here with us today. And then we also have 12-year-old identical twins who both have extremely severe intellectual disabilities and autism. And the way their disabilities manifest themselves is in pretty aggressive behaviors, which you were describing about the car. Mm-hmm. I was driving home from church the other night and had 2 kids ready to take me out, you know, coming in from the back seat, and to the point I had to pull over, or it was going to be a safety hazard on the road. So I absolutely empathize with what
So how do you, I know how she got through it, but how did you get through it?
Well, I think you get through it several different ways. Several people have talked about needing to have God within our lives. A passage that's very meaningful to our family is John 9:1-3, which reads, as he, being Jesus, came along, he came across a man blind from birth. The disciples asked him, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. So in that one passage, Jesus Christ, the master of the universe, has cleared three things. He cleared one, disabilities are not punishment. They're not punishment to the individual, and they're not punishment to their families. So that's addressed and off the table. Number two, this happened so that. That means intent. That means design. That means God had a plan. And the plan, as Christ describes, is so that the work of God might be displayed in that gentleman's life. And that's true for people with disabilities, and that's true for all of us. So in one simple phrase, John 9:3, this whole issue is completely addressed. You're asking about how do you do that? When I look at the woman on the Dr. Phil show, my first question is, who reached out to her? Was there a body of people, in this case the church, I'll give an example, was the church there to recognize that she had a need with her children and to wrap its arms around her and to provide her with the types of supports and tools and things that she needed in order to get through the day? And that's where I get really concerned now when you talk about the danger zone that we're in, is I think there are a lot of people, including some of us who are in the church, who a lot of times will say, you know what, everyone kind of fend for yourself. You know, it's every man for himself or every family for yourself. You fend for yourself and I'll fend for myself. There's nothing biblical about that perspective at all. In fact, it's just the opposite. The Bible teaches us that we need to wrap our arms around each other to help fulfill that plan that God has for each and every one of us. And that's true whether you have an IQ of 180 or an IQ of 40, or if you're physically skilled or not. And that's where I think we've kind of lost our way, is understanding that God's plan for us. And when we see people hurting like that woman, wrapping our arms around her.
Can I tell you something? This is an audience you'd never find in New York City. It is, it's remarkable. And I mean, I know that if I didn't understand God, I probably wouldn't see things as a blessing. You know, when you understand God and you understand that you can win penmanship awards, and you can do absolutely anything, and beyond that, every trial and struggle is a gift. Then your whole life changes. Then your whole life changes. You were going to say?
Yes. When I saw the clip on the Dr. Phil show, the first thing I thought was that the woman has, and we as a country have fallen into the arms of the abortion mindset of convenience and selfish pursuits and instant gratification.
Let me play devil's advocate. She says that they would choose suicide.
Well, that's another part of that is autonomy. You know, we get to choose what we face or not face. And as Christians, our job is to receive what God gives us and to receive it willingly and lovingly. And when I think of the gal, and all of us have a tendency to want to be selfish and pursue what we want to do.
Sure.
And we've lost the idea of sacrificially investing in someone else. You know, that it's a gift to be able to lay down our lives for the betterment of someone else. And that is part of the blessing to us, is that we get to serve Jesus Christ by serving what he calls the least of these, my brothers. You know, that when we do it to the least of these, when we invest in their lives, it is the same thing as serving Jesus Christ.
Mark, you were going to say something?
Well, it's a tough, the day-to-day process is such that you really have to battle your patience is probably the biggest, just on a level where your patience is tested every day, all the time. we have a situation where our child has severe behavioral problems where she'll just basically explode and, punch herself in the face hundreds of times. And we work on that acceptance, but as much as anything else, it's a patience process of kind of just getting through day to day and making that commitment and the sacrifice.
Back in a minute.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, CheaperThanDirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at CheaperThanDirt.com. That's CheaperThanDirt.com.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates. Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
The TRS Files. True tax resolution stories.
Hello, I'm Gary, and I'm not a paid actor. I went from owing $43,000 to the Internal Revenue Service to paying them $1,000.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Tatler Reusable Canning Lids, family owned since 1976. That's right, Tatler Reusable Canning Lids. Yes, reusable, with a lifetime guarantee. Made in America, BPA free. Tatler Reusable Canning Lids, because those who can, do. Get rid of the disposable lid. Go to reusablecanninglids.com. Tatler Reusable Canning Lids.
I live alone, so when I slipped and fell in the kitchen last month and couldn't get to a phone, that's when I knew I needed Life Alert. With just one press of this button, I'm connected to the Life Alert Center, where I can get the help I need, even when I cannot reach a phone. With Life Alert, I'm never alone.
Call 1-800-996-6392 for your free Life Alert brochure. That's 1-800-996-6392. Call today.
How about you, Abby? Can you say Merry Christmas? Abby, look right here and say Merry Christmas.
I want to meet Miss Texas Wheelchair. Is that right? This is Mariah, and you won the crown, what, how many weeks ago?
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
Yes,
you have
sir.
cerebral palsy?
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about what we're talking about, what's going on, what you've seen?
For me in my life, I've seen that God takes what society may think of as weaknesses and turns them into our greatest strengths. And something that's very important to me is to promote inclusion, and I've had inclusion throughout my life. I've been very blessed to be mainstreamed in school, and then also adaptive sports is very important to me. And so I've gotten to do track, baseball, basketball, gymnastics, dance, a whole bunch of different sports, and through that I've met some of my best friends. And even more than just learning sports, it's given me pride, courage, joy, and just these amazing friendships, and it's really given me a place in the community.
anybody who thinks they have a tough life. Man, the joy pouring out of you is fantastic. Fantastic. I prayed. Just last night for Joy. You're an answer to my prayer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'd like to echo what she just said. I think that we as parents need to remember not to shelter our families and not to shelter our kids and just stay at home and not go out in public. I think the world needs to see how we embrace our kids, embrace our situation, and let people see the joy that we have through our kids. And if you just stay home and you never take them anywhere, you're not teaching them, one, about how to be out in public and how to be in the community and everything, but you're also not teaching the community about your kid or your family. And I've always felt very strongly about that. My child has just as much right to go to the movie or to go to the mall or to go to the amusement park. And yes, his behavior might be a little odd, but if enough people see all of us out in the community, they're going to have a tendency to be more accepting and not be afraid of our kids or our situations.
You think people are afraid?
Yes.
Go ahead. You were going to say?
Well, I'm just saying I have this awesome testimony to what everybody's saying.
I love Texas. Testimony.
Actually, I'm originally from Michigan, but anyway. I have a son who's 25 years old, and he goes to a program in Plano, Texas, that's called My Possibilities, and it's a place that was started by parents who did not know where their young adults were going to go after they phased out of the high school, which is a big problem for us parents with children with special needs. And I have seen, this is a program that's grown from 10 young adults to now we have almost 150, just to have them in the community and for the whole community to see what their possibilities are. And I'm also wearing some of the jewelry. We have a store that and a workshop within.
Come on, say the web address. Come on.
I can?
Go ahead, sure, yeah.
www.mypossibilities.com in Plano, Texas.
Okay.
And we have a beautiful store. We have an art department. And we also, we have a chocolate fest. It's called the Chocolate Feast, and it'll be at the shops at Legacy on Sunday starting at 1 o'clock. And you'll get to meet all the wonderful adults that go, we call them hipsters, for hugely important people. Sorry. And so, yes, come out to the shops at Legacy. I don't mean that. I just want everybody to get an exposure of what these young adults are capable of, and they all have many different disabilities.
Brian.
Watching the Dr. Phil show, that was really discouraging. Our daughter's 8. Her name is Abby, and she has Down syndrome, and it was discouraging watching that, but also knowing that there are people out in the community that do care for children with special needs and get it, that understand that God doesn't make mistakes, because I feel like people that view their children that way feel like God made a mistake, and he doesn't. These things happen for a reason. It's all part of his plan. We're not driving this bus, God is. And it's really neat to see how our churches come together to have a program for children with special needs to allow the parents to get out and have date night so they can build their marriage, because it is tough. There's a lot of work, but you just have to work at it. And you can't lay down. It's very tough to do, but lots of prayer that we've prayed a lot, and God will see you through this.
Denise?
I was just going to say that sometimes there have been challenges all the time with Mariah from the time she was little with programs being available, and they weren't always available. And being part of a military family and moving a lot, sometimes you just have to realize that if it's not there, you need to start it yourself. If there wasn't Girl Scouts available and everyone was afraid to take her on and, I don't know, that might be too much work. Sometimes as parents, then you just need to show it and lead the way and just start it yourself and have others join you. And they'll see, hey, that is possible. There are possibilities for people of all kinds of abilities. And programs are out there in the community. I think now, recently, more are becoming available. But I think in some areas it's still hard. It's still hard, and a lot of times it's going to
get harder as the economy
Right.
goes deeper and deeper, the government's not going to be there. It relies on us to do it. Josh.
I think the part that bothered me the most was she placed her children at age 6 or 7. So the past 36 years, she said she visited them twice a month. I mean, for her to decide that it's hard enough and they're in pain, she never saw her children to make that decision. She hasn't, at 6 and 7, they were gone, and she just chose to visit them occasionally.
But it's not, you don't, maybe it's just me. I don't think it is. You don't have the right to make that decision. God makes that decision. When it's time, it's time. And I love that suicide or murder is an option of compassion.
Well, the fact that, and I know at our house we have 3 children and both boys have significant disabilities. The past 2 years we have lived in the hospital for the majority of it. We don't, most of the time we are in separate rooms because we have to worry about seizures or one of our sons choking in the middle of the night if he's aspirating on his own secretion. So, and that's something that we have, with our faith, we have never even fathomed to even think of something like that. And it's a challenge.
My whole problem with what she was saying is that as parents, we have been given this enormous responsibility to be a voice for our children. And she used her ability to be their voice to say they wanted to commit suicide. And I don't understand how our children are such a blessing. Our children teach us every day. Our children help us see our weaknesses so that we can be better people and that we can go out in the community and serve more people. And it's for her to go in there and use their voices to say they want to die.
Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask this. You have something to say, Tyler?
One thing, as somebody with a disability, I've always been judged, and I think that you have to come with a different approach. Like so many people, once they can't do it the way that they've been taught, and the way that they only know how to do it, they give up. And as whatever I do and the sports that I play, that sometimes kids they wonder why I try to go the extra mile and try why are you doing that? Because you know what, I want to be the best that I can. I want to figure out how am I supposed to dribble a basketball and play basketball, or how am I supposed to catch baseball? That even though may look weird to you, you know what, I'm going to take a different approach. I think so many people just kind of skip that whole. There's no creativity. Why do we have to learn things a certain way? Why do we have to learn a certain way we're told to? I think once you unlock that possibility of that, I can do anything. I don't care what way you want me to do it. I'll do it anyway, as long as I can do it. I've learned how to tie my shoe and.
God bless you, Mary Ellen. Great job. Wow, that's fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, let me wrap with this. Who has something to say to people who might be watching and say, "No, you guys are a bunch of religious zealots," or, that's not the compassionate thing to do? What do you say to those people, or to the people who are saying we can't afford? We're not going to be able to afford. Mary Ellen.
I just wonder where it stops. Yeah. What if I have bad acne? What if I have a big nose, or a lopsided ear, or fat thighs? Who's the judge of the perfect person? Who decides who lives, who dies? How far is it going to go before it's the blonde-haired, blue-eyed race that exists and everybody else is gone? I think if you take it farther, what do you have? Who amongst us is perfect?
Somebody said to me the other day, I just love this phrase, "Don't judge me on my sins just because they're different than yours." I thought, that is perfect. We're all flawed in some way or another. Yeah.
All broken.
Anybody else? Yes.
I can't imagine a better way to practice faith, whatever faith you are. I think, that unconditional love. And we talked to
houses of worship about this all the time. These kids will teach you unconditional love. My daughter certainly has. She's taught me to stop and smell the roses and the small moments of life that I didn't really appreciate before.
Okay.
And it's just taking a moment and going, wow, this is a cool moment.
How many of you guys would have survived without your faith or church? Not a single hand. Even if the government was there helping every step of the way. I love Texas. We'll be back in a minute. You've been hearing me talk about gold for a while now. I was a client of Goldline long before they were a client of mine. I first started buying gold. It was right after September 11th because I thought, gee, things might get crazy. And it was about $300 an ounce. Pretty impressive return on your investment. I was told that it was foolish at 300 some an ounce, 500, 900, 1200, 1500. Citibank came out this week and said that they expect it to be up to 2,500 or 2,400 within 12 months. They could be wrong. Could be 800. I don't know. I don't buy it as an investment. I buy gold as a hedge against inflation and an insurance policy, quite honestly, to hedge my bet against the ridiculous decisions of an out-of-control government. Gold's not right for everybody, may not be right for you. Gold or silver, if you want to find out if it's right for you, find out all the important risk information. They'll send you a package and you can talk to them. This isn't a decision you can or should make overnight, but make a decision. Find out if it's right for you. 1-800-757-GOLD or goldline.com.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates. Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
You look so beautiful. But you're about to lose everything.
You're gonna lose everything.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here.
You're gonna lose your files.
There's no warning when you lose your computer files. That's why you need Carbonite Online Backup. So whatever happens, your files are safe. Try it for free at Carbonite.com.
Are you a homeowner 62 or older? Are you looking to access cash from your home or eliminate your monthly mortgage payment? How about both? Then call the number on your screen. With a reverse mortgage, there are no monthly mortgage payments. You will still own your home, and you will have many options on how to receive your cash. Call now. It's time to get all the facts, and Reverse Mortgage Solutions is here to help.
Call 855-200-1039. That's 855-200-1039.
Okay, so has anybody actually started saving for college yet?
Oh, not me.
No, you got time.
Oh, no, we actually started.
You have?
Really?
Sure. We figure you start saving a little now, or you'll borrow a lot later on.
Yeah, but how did you even know where to start?
Oh, I found out about the Gerber Life College Plan.
Call now for free information on the Gerber Life College Plan. It's easy.
It's pretty much worry-free.
Well, how could it be worry-free? What if something happens with the stock market?
No matter what happens, we get guaranteed safe growth.
So when she's ready for college, the money will be there.
And it doesn't take a lot of money to get started.
For as little as $10 a week, you can start saving for college and get guaranteed growth. Just call now.
Oh, it's a life insurance policy, too.
Oh, that's different.
And if she decides not to go to college, there's no penalty, so she can use the money for anything.
We've got to get started.
Yes, we do, because you're going to college.
Call 1-800-892-3073 for your free information. That's 1-800-892-3073.
I have to tell you, last week was spooky shows. This week has been a week of remarkable heroes and people who are just doing incredible things, from Gert Wielders to the guys from the NSA to this audience. And take heart. Goodness abounds. From Dallas. Good night, America.
Breaking news tonight. We've got real news. This just in. Real news from the Blaze.
Welcome to Real News from the Blaze. I am not Amy Holmes. Amy's got the night off tonight, but I am Will Kane. And Mike, I don't know if you can get a shot of the whole table here tonight, but obviously something is missing. No Amy Holmes.
I don't have a jacket.
That's what it is. It's you have no jacket. No SE Cup. It's a table full of guys. I don't know what we're going to do with that, guys. No women's input. A little later, we're going to do what a table full of guys usually does when there's no women. We're going to talk about women, or our woman. But first, we're going to talk about economics, stagnation. New jobs numbers came out today, and the economy added 115,000 jobs in April. Now, this is less than experts were predicting. They were looking for something like 170,000 jobs, 180,000 jobs. It's less than the number that we need to keep up with population growth, which is about 125,000 jobs. And I think even worse, it's down from the number of jobs we added in March, which is about 154,000 jobs. In fact, let's put that up over here. I want to show you the number of jobs that the economy has added over the last several months. And as you can see, that last bar, the green bar, is what we added just this past month, 115,000 jobs in April. Now look at that compared to what we were doing last month, as I said, which we added 150,000 jobs in March. And this 2 or 3 months ago, in December of last year, in January and February this year, we were adding close to 200,000 to 300,000 jobs, above 200,000 jobs a month. Now, figures like this, and economic statistics and polls and metrics such as wage stagnation, are having a lot of people kick around that term, stagnation. Now, I think we have to ask ourselves, though, what is stagnation? Often when we talk about the economy, we talk about growth and contraction. Growth, is the economy growing? Is GDP growing? Are job numbers growing? Are we contracting? Is unemployment growing? Is the GDP pulling back? And always is put forward as in this kind of term where we're either going forward or we're moving backward. But it doesn't really account for what if we're just standing still or barely moving forward? That's stagnation. Officially, stagnation is an economy that's growing at about only 2 to 3% annually, just barely moving forward. Now, I want to show you that's 2 to 3% GDP growth. Let's put up what the United States has done in GDP growth over the last 5 years, from 2007 to present. 4 years ago, in 2007, we had an economy at $14 trillion. And here today, we have an economy just barely above $14 trillion. It's been growing. At times, it's been above 3%, but most of the time, below 2%. Now, let's put that and posit that against the kind of growth we've seen in the United States over the last 50 years. 50 years ago, starting in 1960, we start this chart in 1970, we had an economy that was about $500 billion. We grew at an annualized pace north of 3% a year to an economy at almost $15 trillion. That is massive growth. Now, let's return to that term stagnation. What does it look like to stand still? Have you ever heard of Japan's lost decade? In the 1980s, the late 1980s, Japan had a massive credit bubble, a massive growth in assets such as real estate and houses, just like we did here, and then a financial crisis. And that is what Japan ended up looking like. Through the 80s, Japan grows very similar to the United States. But look at that. In the mid-90s, it flattens. That's like a table. It's flat. And Japan is now largely where they were in the mid-90s. It grew below 1% a year. That, right there, is an illustration of stagnation. So here's the question. Is that what we're now wading into? As we saw in those early charts for the United States for the last 3 or 4 years, is kind of tabling out. Are we at the beginning of what in Japan they called the lost decade? Now, guys, we know that in Japan, They embarked on all kinds of measures, Keynesian economic measures of fiscal stimulus, monetary stimulus, a lot of things that we've tried over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think that leads to the obvious question. Matt, I'll start with you. Are we wading down the same path of Japan? Are we on the way to stagnation?
We very well could be. I think we're kind of already in stagnation, as you just described with the chart up there. When I think Japan, looking back and trying to compare it, and there's a lot of comparisons. People say it's not even close. It's completely different. What I look at is what our government, what the Fed has done compared to what the Bank of Japan and the Japanese government did in the same situation. And as you mentioned, very similar tactics, keeping interest rates extremely low, stimulus packages. And what we've seen in Japan, we see a little bit of a rise for a few years, and then stimulus comes right back down. Low interest rates did absolutely nothing. And the Fed keeping interest rates low now are kind of keeping a bottom underneath our market, but eventually we need to have growth. And the path that Japan took did not lead to growth. And what scares me is the path that we're going down now with the Fed and the U.S. government. We're going down a similar path that we do not see growth. We're kind of putting a Band-Aid on the situation where it's not getting any worse. We're going to have probably slow growth, stagnant growth, but I do not see where the ultimate growth will come from to get back to that second chart that you showed where we're going to kind of go on an uphill turn. It's scary. It's quite scary.
Well, growth is one thing. I think one of the terms we often hear from the Obama administration is that we avoided a depression. And in fact, in Japan, they're sometimes not ashamed of that stagnation. They brag and they're proud of the fact they didn't go into a depression. In fact, they point to that in the United States in the 1930s, we had a 46, I mean, that is an unfathomable number, a 46% drop in GDP. I mean, the economy essentially halved. And they're pretty proud, Buck, that in Japan, that didn't happen.
Isn't there an argument you made that what you've essentially done, though, is just extended out the depression over a longer period of time instead of taking what would be, look, we all agree that markets are cyclical. That's been understood for a long time. Anybody who trades in stocks, right, Matt? Yep. Tell me if I'm wrong. Markets are cyclical. What it seems like a lot of these measures do is essentially prevent the pain. It's like saying, I'm not going to pay the bill now. I'm going to just sort of pay the interest on it over a long period of time. But the thing about that is that then you're obviously allocating capital to something that, you know, over the long term is going to be a drag on you. So I just think that what we're seeing is basically making sure that this is going to be slow because we refuse to accept that there was going to be a reset in the market. I think that's why people opposed TARP. That's why people are upset about, obviously, the stimulus money, because it was essentially saying, look, we're not going to allow the market to act as a market should. We're going to do everything we can to basically artificially prop up the market under the pretext of, if we don't do this, we have a depression, we're all going to die, there'll be no food on the shelves.
So are you suggesting that maybe we should have and would have been better off if we'd allowed that, whatever that contraction might have been, 46% in the 30s, say it was 20% now, that huge dip in the economy, that would have been healthier to go through that process?
And it's not necessarily that it's healthier, it's just that's the converse to what we're seeing right now. So we shouldn't be surprised at all by what's going on. The only thing that's dangerous about it, or that really bothers me, is that in doing so, in stretching out the pain, we have added substantially to national debt. We've talked about private debt a lot on the show, but obviously the national debt. So we really are compounding the problem. And as we've talked about before as well, the too big to fail issue is many people say bigger than ever with the banks. We have not changed the structural things that should have been changed and would have been changed if we had allowed the market to actually correct.
But the big fear for Bernanke and the administration at the time was the fact that they didn't want to have the Great Depression. We've only really had one Great Depression in this country. They did not want to go back to the Great Depression because they saw how long it took to come out of that. But what they didn't think is, wow, you know what? This may actually be prolonged just as long. You don't take that one big hit as you did in the Depression, but as you mentioned, Buck, this could last for a decade, easily be a lost decade. We already have a lost decade in the stock market. 10 years, you've gone nowhere if you bought into the U.S. stock market. How much longer can that last until people start giving up investing in stocks, giving up on the economy, losing confidence in our country? What happens then?
Well, from a populist perspective, using the money supply, you solve today's momentary problems, feeding people, clothing people, housing people. But when you use that money supply and spread it out, you devalue the currency and you extend outward the depression. And the funny thing about Keynesian economics is most liberals use the Cliff Notes version. They don't like the part where he says, well, wait a second, you can do all these things if you have surplus, not structural debt and deficit. We have both. Japan has both. The funny thing is if you say, well, all businesses have to go into debt to grow their industries, right? But what is the reason you go into debt? Because you reliably believe that the money you borrow or the bonds you issue will pay you back. If you said, well, we've got oil, so we're gonna use the government to stimulate the oil industry. We know it's a winner. We know we could sell it domestically and internationally. That's one thing. But trying to force us into green energy, which we know is a failure and is a loser and is continuing to lose, you've taken Keynesian economics, but you failed to produce the growth because you invested it politically, not into the right businesses.
I think we've got two different things bouncing around the table that are pretty interesting. One, is it better to take an immediate pain, immediate pound of flesh in the short term, and then heal from that? Or is it better to go through this kind of, as you suggested, propping it up, this slow growth, this slow alleviation of the pain, and see what happens? And we have two examples, right? Japan is the example of using both fiscal stimulus and monetary stimulus to ease the pain, to avoid that depression. Now, they, as a result, had a decade of stagnation. In the United States, we had that depression. But I think what many of these guys fear, the Paul Krugmans of the world, the Richard Koo's of the world, the Japans of the world, is, honestly, the only way we got out of that depression in the end was through a world war.
So the suggestion is that...
How do you get out of a depression? So avoid it at all costs.
Krugman believes that we should spend more money, which I think, and he still says that now today. He actually wrote an article pretty recently, I think, just discussing how the big issue here is that we didn't use fiscal stimulus measures even more, which is pretty astounding. I mean, I guess
but he acts like they were hindered by some force. What force? They had the
Right,
House.
the first 2 years they had everything locked
up. But
up.
it's always the argument of the Keynesian that if it didn't work, it means we didn't do enough.
Right, why not make it a cool $10 trillion then? I mean, I just don't understand.
Triple the minimum wage.
Sort of the same way that liberalism accepts no limits to what can be done, and we talked about this with Jonah about what a progressive is. There's no limit to what you can do. It seems like Keynesians like Krugman are basically saying, just spend just whatever you have to do. As much money as has to go into it is necessary. I mean, I think this is why, look, the unemployment numbers are not good.
Let's shift this. So we've kicked
8%.
the name Keynes around like 4 times this table. John Maynard Keynes is the economist that basically pioneers this thought that the government steps in times of depression, in times of economic troubles, and props up the economy. Keynes' big statement, his big catchphrase was animal spirits. You have to ignite the animal spirits, which is basically ambition. Get people out there consuming, confident. So let's put aside Barack Obama and Keynes for that matter. What can Mitt Romney do to change the calculus, to ignite animal spirits?
I think it comes down to confidence, getting confidence back in the American public. I had lunch earlier today with a small business owner. Same thing I hear every time I meet with a small business owner. I'm not hiring more people because I don't know what's going to be coming up around the corner, whether it's taxes, whether it be Obama health care, and they have no confidence in the U.S. economy, in our government right now. We need to get those animal spirits, that confidence back. Small businesses is what brought us out of every single recession. Let's go back to the early 80s, the Reagan recovery, right? The Reagan recovery, how did he do that? He lowered taxes, and that's what really spurred it on. In the first 11 quarters of that recovery, the Reagan recovery, he created 9.4 million jobs. The first 11 quarters of Obama's recovery, let's call it, 3.9 million jobs. Even though he's touting 8.1% unemployment, that number is completely false. And if you look back at participation rate, that's taking the amount of people out there in the U.S. that are working age, that actually have jobs, 63.6%. The lowest since December of 1981. Things aren't good. So the animal spirits are terrible right now. People are not confident.
You just wait till he claims, you wait till they try to ride those summer hiring numbers. You just wait. They're going to try to campaign on the numbers from June, July, and August and ignore September to November. Because after the summer, right back down.
And do you think they'll lop off more people, just saying they don't look for work, so they don't count anymore? They've dropped off a little bit because they've done that. They've dropped off.
Why do you think he's not bringing the troops home?
A million people already, saying that basically they don't count as unemployed because they're so despondent that they're not even looking for jobs anymore.
I don't know exactly what Mitt Romney can do, but I know that animal spirits come naturally to Americans. We are ambitious people. We're different than Japan. We're not savers. We're spenders, investors, and risk takers. Hopefully Mitt Romney can do something to help us find that spirit again. After the break, here we go. We're going to talk about a girl. It's what guys do when there's no girls around. This one's named Julia. Stick around.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates. Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
Food independence, emergency preparedness, self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com. Get our survival seed vault and feed your family from your own garden for just $37.95. Our non-hybrid heirloom seeds are genuinely American, just like you. Your survival needs and survival seeds are at MyPatriotSupply.com. MyPatriotSupply.com. Self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com.
By age 5, I could drain a three-pointer. By 8, I could outplay opponents twice my size. By 10, I knew someday I would make the pros. Focus, dedication, determination. These are the things that have prepared me for today. But for what tomorrow might bring, I prepared with Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply. It gives me the confidence to face any opposition. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
My name is Gibb, and I am not an actor. As a result of my dealings with Tax Resolution Service, my tax burden to the IRS went from more than $35,000 to zero.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
As we've talked about, there's no ladies here at the table with us tonight, so we decided to import one. She's fictional. Her name's Julia. She's a creation of the Obama campaign. They released a video or a slideshow yesterday called The Life of Julia. It illustrates how Obama's policies, how the policies of his administration affect the life of a fictional woman, starting at age 3 and as she goes through life to the age of 67. Andrew, this was something.
Well, yeah, this one is something I'm actually really in love with. The president said, when he was talking about health care, that if we were starting from scratch, of course we'd start with single payer, but we're not. The funny thing is, by looking at this, he's looking at social design here. He's looking at designing the lives of people, and it seems like liberal elites think it would be better to have a society where people were compacted into a state of mediocrity than people left to do as they wish, and some people will do well, and truth be told, some people won't do so well. That's just too much for the people who want to plan our lives. And we always talk about the cradle to the grave society. Here it is. And the funny thing is, the choices we're being given under this dynamic are either central planning or nihilism. So, and I got my Frederick Bastiat right here, the law. I'm not going to bore you with a lengthy quote. But basically, Bastiat wrote in 1851 that as socialism was becoming more popular, they were given choices. Either the state will feed you or nobody will eat. So as we start with this, I'm going to start with age 3. The Head Start program. The assumption is if President Obama isn't there to help you get ahead, and not everybody can get ahead together because then you become average, without President Obama and the Democrats, 3-year-old Julia won't go to nursery school and therefore won't be on the path to learning. This is the beginning of the cradle. The other thing is, with all these programs and debt and deficit, every one of these Julias are born into debt and deficit and must access these government programs by design.
So you're saying Julia at age 3's life's a little different than he's painting it?
Well, if Mitt Romney was in charge, she would be illiterate, in the rest of her life.
Right. Matt, what would she be like? What would our young friend Julia be like at age 18?
So at age 18, like most other boys and girls, she's getting ready to go to college. So President Obama says, Julia, under my plan, she will get the American Opportunity Tax Credit. It's worth up to $10,000 over 4 years. That may sound like a lot of money, but anybody who has children, anybody who has children to go to school now, $2,500 a year is not getting you very far at all.
That's books.
Yeah,
that'll buy you books for
if you're
a
lucky.
semester.
No spring break.
Yeah, and then also she will get opportunity to apply for a Pell Grant. Well, under Obama, under Romney, what he's saying is that tax credit will be allowed to expire. The Pell Grants will be taken away from an extra 10 million students. To me, this $10,000 isn't going to make or break Julia going to college. I hate to break it to her. Either she's going to go or she's not. She can get student loans like everybody else probably seen at this table did at one point, get a scholarship. $10,000, I hate to break it to you, President Obama, it's not going to change her decision.
Well, I've got Julia picking up at age 25. We can show Julia at 25. She's now graduating from college. We have 2 things we should point out on this slide. First of all, Julia got a little got a little wild hair and changed her hair color red all of a sudden. Now she's post-college.
Better than blue.
It's better than
ginger.
blue.
She's a ginger.
And we've got this story in the Blaze. I was just told that that the flag, look at the flag. It's on the wrong side of the podium. The flag is supposed to be on the right side. That's coming from Mike Opelka, who's actually sitting right over here in our audience tonight. Mike Opelka found this and pointed out, apparently the Obama administration doesn't know what side of the podium the American flag stands on. Regardless, Obama promises that under his programs, Julia, she'll have half of the interest rates. They'll be halved on her student loans than they would be under Obama, thus expanding college ability to pay off their debts and go to college much, much more under President Obama and Mitt Romney. I want to point out one thing, that this entire student loan issue, the student loan bubble, we've actually talked about this table. I've researched it more. It's a bunch of hype. It's nonsense. The average student loan debt is $18,000 to $25,000. Talk about manageable, Matt. $10,000 of, you're talking about how much the tax credit. This is nothing. People can pay off $18,000 to $25,000. The story of the kid with $200,000 in debt, it's just an aberration.
Yeah, and that $18,000 to $20,000, interest rates are very low already. I mean, very low interest rates. They're very forgiving if you miss a month or two. And really, if you have that, it's only $150 a month, $150. So if you can't afford a $40 a week, you get some other issues.
Well, if you talk about law school, med school, those sorts of things, if you want doctors and lawyers, that's a lot more than $10,000 or $18,000.
It is. And you know what's funny, Buck? They're the ones belly aching about it.
Yeah.
They're taking on all this debt,
well,
and I don't have their law jobs these days.
Well,
right. Big laws contracting. Sorry, Wilcott.
No. I was just going to say that the funny thing is at no point do we see Julia taking responsibility for her own life. At 3, I don't expect her to be paying for her preschool education. But here we are at 27, 3 years younger than Sandra Fluke, and she's getting her free birth control. Apparently, according to Obama, if Mitt Romney's in charge, she's actually going to have to pay for this birth control. And I know this
kept her hair red.
You gave me the one that would have gotten us in trouble if the women were here tonight. Thanks,
No, you picked it. Don't pretend like we assigned this to
you. Well, that's basically the thing here. We've now seen the health care debate. We've now seen health care now. Everything is being moved into health care. These are not needs. These are wants. These are things people want to do, as you'll see I think it's in the next phase of the life of Julia. This is the point in her life where she's doing her thing, and she's a single girl, and she's a web designer. How could she be him? I feel like I'm doing one of these like Yaz commercials or something. She can't be hindered by paying for her own birth control. But if we're up to Mitt Romney, her Saturday nights would be horrible.
Well, actually, that line is one of my favorites in this 27-year-old slide. It says, if it up to Mitt Romney, Julia's health care decisions would be in the hands of her employer, the person paying for her health insurance.
What is she, a web designer for the church?
How horrible. The guy paying for your health insurance decides what he might cover.
So put it in the hands of government and make everybody else pay for it.
Right.
Oh, the humanity if you've got to buy your own birth control.
It's back to me. Julia's now moved to 87, had a kid, cut her hair short, dyed it back black. And her son Zachary's headed off to school under President Obama. He's going to be confronted with great teachers in a great neighborhood, have better facilities, and he'll be on his way to a wonderful education because of President Obama's programs like Race to the Top. Whereas, under the dreaded Mitt Romney-Paul Ryan budget, it would have steep cuts to federal funding in schools in all 50 states. This is where I point out, since the 1970s, we have raised per-student spending on education at the federal level from $5,000 to $12,000. We have more than doubled the amount of money we spend on students, and test scores have been absolutely flat.
Where's Zachary's daddy in this?
Maybe he's at work.
Yeah, we don't know. But D.C. public schools, I think, are the most expensive per pupil in the United States, and I think have, if not the worst, the second worst outcome for dollars spent in. So it's like, it's anyway, sorry.
No, I'm done. I think it's a little, by the way, is it a little offensive or stereotypical that the minute she has a kid, she gets the bob?
Well, no, even the next one I'm about to jump to, she now loses a skirt, goes to mom jeans, and has on flats. She's from a skirt and heels. Now she's 42 years old, and now she wants to be a businesswoman. Under Obama's plan, she can apply for, and qualify, of course, a small business administration loan through the SBA. Well, they're saying the Romney-Ryan budget cut would cut into these programs by about 20%. This blows my mind. It's not that easy to go out there and get an SBA loan. It was a couple years ago. It's not that easy to go out and start our own web business because the administration in the last 3 years, the regulations have gone through the roof. I don't care if it's starting a finance business like I have or a web business. The finance are through the roof. He doesn't talk about the tax code here either. How much more she's probably going to be paying in taxes as she makes a little bit more money. And it sounds so easy. She's going to go out, start her business, get tax cuts, and then she's going to go hire a couple employees. If life was only that simple, it's not that simple. Right now, nobody wants, I shouldn't say nobody, the amount of people starting new businesses is at the lowest we've seen in over a decade because people are concerned about regulations, about taxes. The government does not, quote unquote, have their back when it comes to being an entrepreneur. So this, to me, it sounds good on paper. very unrealistic.
Yeah, this is kind of back to our last segment where we talk about animal spirits, what the government can do to actually ignite animal spirits, people's desire to go take a risk, start a business. And the truth is, you set the foundation. You set tax rates people can expect, confidence, certainty. Give them an environment in which they know what to expect. Not a free SBA loan, not a cheap loan.
We should just be happy she wasn't starting a solar company.
Yeah. Buck, you held out until...
have plenty of money then. Anyway.
You held out until Julia got old, which we have all kinds of questions about that, but...
In this slide, we're looking at Julia at 65 years old. And she enrolls in Medicare, helping her afford preventive care and the prescription drugs she needs. That's what it says on the slide. But under Mitt Romney, Medicare, as we know it, could end, leaving Julia with nothing but an insurance voucher, which means she could pay up to $63.50 extra each year. I mean, look, we've talked many times about how Medicare is the 800-pound gorilla in the entitlement debt room. Obviously, by the time this hypothetical person would be 65 years old, Medicare would have already become so outsized and so expensive that massive cuts to it would be forced. The only question is, at that point, would we have had to double income tax rates? What else would have had to happen? But nobody, and we've seen this play out. We've seen Geithner, Bernanke, these folks talking about this. They accept the fact, the reality that, basically, if we don't do something, at some point it will be done for us. And all they're doing now is saying, well, for the next 10 years, we're not going to deal with this, because politically that looks pretty good, right? We'll keep it as we know it for 10 years. Kicking the can down the road in the biggest way, and Julia thinks that basically everything will be paid for by the time she gets to this age. So not going to happen.
No, if Julia's 3 and I've got a 4-year-old, she cannot count on Medicare. And this is just a fundamental untruth they've painted here, that she's going to have this wonderful Medicare program on the path we're on.
Right. I mean, this is really advertising, actually, in an election year for the people that are expecting to go on Medicare next year or the year after that. I mean, this is really just essentially political messaging for them, because nobody with a straight face who, understands the most basic math would say, oh, yeah, it's going to be the way it is now. It'll be just like that.
This is a PowerPoint version of throwing grandma off the cliff.
Exactly.
That's what this is.
So there's that one. And then I've got a double whammy here. End of life, double whammy. Julia, we go to 67 years old. Julia retires. After years of contributing to Social Security, she received monthly benefits that will help her retire comfortably. Under Mitt Romney, her benefits could be cut by 40%. Well, one thing, if she expects to retire comfortably on Social Security, I think she will be sadly mistaken. That's not going to be enough. That is not as big an issue as Medicare in terms of long-term debt. We've all looked at the projections. But just the idea that just because the benefits today could be cut under Romney, that doesn't take into account setting up private 401k accounts. It doesn't take into account other long-term private sector structuring that could actually provide for people in retirement that doesn't put them on essentially.
Who realistically thinks she's going to have Social Security at all at that age?
Neither that or Medicare. We've only got a little bit of time left. But let me ask you this, guys. We can laugh, and we should, about this caricature of Julia's life being all flowers and roses under Obama and terrible under Romney. But this has got to be pretty good politically.
This is statist propaganda, but it is good politically.
This is societal planning. This is utopianism. This is somebody saying, look, these are the benefits of cradle to the grave.
When don't you think it will
When
work?
the president says, what do you want to be, on your own? Yeah, this country was founded by people who are on their own. They grew families and businesses on their own. They worked jobs on their own. They weren't coddled from the moment they were born till they died by government. You don't produce strong entrepreneurial people when you don't make them responsible for all these things.
We all agree, but will it work politically? That's my question.
I think if people take it as a whole, no. If you say, well, I'm at this age and here's what he's offering me, maybe. But if you were to take this from start to finish and go, wait a second, where's all this stuff going to come from?
Yeah, well, I am afraid it's going to work politically.
I think it's going to work politically this election season, too. I think it's meant for people that are much older than Julia, hypothetically, is when she starts out. Anyway.
All right, next, tonight's top 3 stories from the Blaze.
Have you considered silver as part of your portfolio strategy? Silver is the most affordable precious metal, and it has outperformed gold over the last 10 years. Maybe it's time you consider silver. Silver can help diversify and balance your portfolio with a tangible asset that can move independently from other financial assets. and silver enjoys the benefit of both investment and industrial demand. It's never too late to diversify your portfolio with precious metals. Let Goldline, a precious metals leader, help you get started. Call Goldline and get your free investor kit. Be sure to ask about our price guarantee program. Use your credit card for safety and convenience and enjoy free shipping. Call Goldline now and buy silver with confidence. Get started today with Goldline.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates. Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
If you're a veteran with a 100% service-connected disability and your family has Champ VA, here's some important news. With our Champ VA supplement, your family can have quality health insurance at very little cost. You earn this health benefit. Why buy private insurance or employers' health plans? Champ VA with our supplement gives you complete health coverage. We also offer TRICARE supplements. Call 1-800-899-1900.
It is time for tonight's top 3 stories. Unfortunately, the Blaze's editor-in-chief, Scott Baker, he couldn't join the guys' table tonight. He couldn't be with us. So we're going to go to the site's national security editor, Buck Sexton. What's up, Buck?
Hey, how you guys doing?
How you guys doing?
Wow.
Undisclosed location.
Location, gentlemen. Undisclosed.
All right, what do we got, Buck, from your undisclosed location?
We are coming to you with the top 3 stories from theblaze.com. Editors have been hard at work putting together stuff. Some excellent reading for you coming into the weekend here. Number 3 right now is Megyn Kelly cracking jokes about Elizabeth Warren. Megyn Kelly from Fox News. She's making some comments on there. There's video from Fox. You can tune into that one. You can see what's going on there. You know, Warren has gotten into some heat recently for allegations that she claimed to be Native American earlier in her life. Number 2 story on the Blaze right now, we have Ted Nugent in an interview with CBS, and he actually is swearing, or rather swears, I should say, at the interviewer, and it gets tense. And then the article, it's John Seidel piece, the writer, he lays it out. He lays out the backstory here because there's some things going on in the background as to why this would happen, but I don't want to spoil it for you. So tune into that. That story is actually rocking up pretty fast right now. But number 1 story, by a mile, crushing it right now on the Blaze, a Mike Opelka original, and it is Sean Hannity going toe-to-toe with a spokesman from Occupy Wall Street. Now, I actually remembered seeing this guy. He was on MSNBC and became pretty well known for the soundbite, "It's revolution, not reform." Well, Hannity takes it right to him. You've got to check out this interview. Essentially asks him what he wants, and it just turns into quite an on-air fight. There's all kinds of back and forth.
I actually felt bad
you saw
for
this one?
Yeah, I actually felt bad for him. I mean, Hannity tears him apart.
And curses.
And curses twice.
Yeah, I've known Sean for 10 years. I've never heard him curse even in private conversation.
Yeah, the guest did not appear prepared for this one. I mean, a few minutes into it, he seems like he's pretty flustered. But look, I mean, Hannity asks some fair but hard questions, and, it gets contentious. But that this is somebody who is a spokesman for Occupy Wall Street, I think, means that folks should really tune into this. And by the way, they are. This story is absolutely crushing it on the charts. Story I wanted to boost. This is interesting. It's essentially Tiffany Gabay has put together a study of an SEIU manual, and this is looking at ways that you can influence your employer, you can influence other employers, ways that essentially you can get your way. But it even mentions things like, don't do this because that's extortion. Don't do this because that's against the law. But essentially giving people a handbook as to how they could use sort of, organizations, organized labor to put major pressure on employers and get what they want in the end. So, I think these days, especially coming to the election, critical people see this, and, it's very interesting. This training manual. It's I've got screenshots of it up, so you can read it for yourself firsthand, and also Tiffany's got some commentary on it.
Well, I'm really glad you could Skype in for this segment. I wouldn't have known what to do if we hadn't had a Skype connection during the third segment tonight. Be careful, by the way.
Got to go to the Blaze secret lair, Will Kane. You know how it is.
Well, that secret looks like you're in a jungle, so be careful, by the way, coming back from that jungle of tree behind you.
I'm well trained, sir. Not to worry.
All right, good. All right, when we come back, did the administration botch this whole Qin deal in China, the Qin Guangcheng story? We'll find out when we come back.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates. Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
Like you, I would do anything to protect my family. That's why I have food insurance, the emergency food supply that guarantees my family's most basic needs, safe and nutritious food. These high-quality freeze-dried meals last up to 25 years and are compact, affordable, and delicious. Start with a 2-week supply or plan for several months, whatever's right for you. Provide security for your family. Order food insurance today.
When it's warm, you'd love to open every door and let fresh air into your home. The trouble is, you'd end up letting lots of bugs into your home as well. Now there's Magic Mesh, the new type of screen door that opens easily and then magically closes itself behind you. The secret isn't really magic, it's magnets. 18 magnets to be exact. When you separate them, they automatically snap back together. That makes it great for pets too, because instead of scratching and whining, they can come and go as they please. So let the fresh air in and keep those annoying bugs out with Magic Mesh, a $40 value, yours for just $19.95. But wait, call right now and we'll double the offer. Just pay separate processing and handling. You get 2 Magic Mesh curtains for just $19.95. Don't delay. Call and order yours today.
To order Magic Mesh for $19.95 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-572-9265 or log on to buymagicmesh.com.
We told you about the blind Chinese human rights activist Qin Guangcheng, who is trying to come to this country. And a new deal looks like it might make that happen and can finally end this whole embarrassing ordeal for the Obama administration over its handling or bumbling of this delicate diplomatic dance. In a moment, we're going to talk to John Tasek. He's a former State Department official and senior fellow and director of the Future Asia Project. But first, Buck, tell us what's going on. What's the latest with this Qin Guangcheng story?
It looks like he may get the opportunity to come here to NYU on a sort of study abroad program, if you will. Yeah, he'll be right here in New York City. That's the latest. It is not official yet. Chinese government says that they are going to process his application expeditiously, as quickly as they can. You would think that would mean today, but I guess it could be a few days. But this sort of at least delays the issue of, well, will he go back? Will he go back into China? You know, will he go back home to China? Does he feel safe there? Is his family safe there? This certainly creates a buffer and some time for things to get settled if it goes through, and it looks like it's a reasonable out for the Obama administration, for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to handle this.
And this deal to bring him to NYU, by the way, that would include his family? Bring his family with him?
Not clear.
Really?
I'm not clear on that yet, yeah. So, but you know who might be is John Tasek, actually, who I'd like to bring in now to ask him what he thinks of the handling of the situation. John, how are you doing?
Fine, fine. Thanks for having me.
So if I could ask you, you know, we've been talking a lot about this, and the press has sort of been certainly hitting this as a bumbled effort by the State Department. What went wrong, and do you think that they are doing things right now with regard to Qin Guangcheng?
Well, the thing that went wrong was that the State Department and the embassy did not, they weren't talking to each other. Last week, we had the, in fact, for this entire past week, we had the embassy reaching out to a internationally renowned human rights activist in China who had been in jail for his human rights activism and then had been for the last 3 or 4 years in extrajudicial detention, which was something that was not sanctioned by law. He's blind. He's a gentleman. He clearly was working for the welfare of the people in his community. He was an anti-abortion activist. He escapes somehow. He makes contact with the U.S. Embassy, and the embassy reaches out and brings him in last week and gives him asylum. Not knowing that the State Department, or if not knowing, at least not fully coordinating with the State Department, which was planning this week for one of the biggest bilateral conferences that the U.S. and China have each year, the so-called Strategic and Economic Dialogue. Now, the problem we have is that in this past week, something has taken the focus off of the Strategic and Economic Dialogue, which I thought should have been very important, and put it on this asylum case, and somehow the Americans get blamed for it. So the real fiasco here is, how did the Americans let themselves get blamed for doing the right thing? And did the Americans, in their embarrassment, give up a lot during the Strategic and Economic Dialogue so that it either accomplished nothing or we're giving up things? One of the things that really amazed me was that all of a sudden the Chinese Minister of Defense, General
Hey, John, I just want to ask you, do you think that what is on the table right now, this offer, is this a pretty good diplomatic solution if it goes through? And do you think that...
Oh, yeah, this is the solution that was going to take place all the time. I think that the ideal would have been for the Chinese government to let him stay in China and actually matriculate at a Chinese law school. Clearly, the Chinese government didn't want to do that because they don't want lawyers that are not completely under the discipline of the Communist Party.
Well, one thing that I haven't seen, John, much here is, what's the tone in the Chinese press? I know, the state control over there is very different, obviously, than it is here. But what is the tone? What is the sense you get of things over there when you're talking about this rights activist? He's blind. They're saying that when he was held under house arrest, he'd be beaten. I mean, they're talking about literally beating a blind man. I mean, is there a sense somewhere, is there widespread outrage in China over this issue, or is it a bigger issue right now in the U.S., or how do you view it from their perspective?
Well, it's a far bigger issue in the United States. Of course, in China, nobody knows about it except the people right in Dongshigu Township in Linyi, where he's from, and they know what good he's done. I think in China there was a couple of articles. There were a couple of articles last November in which the Chinese newspapers said, "Well, these are problems with the local people down there, and the local government seems to have been overstepping its bounds." And then that's the last we heard of it. Then this past week we had the Chinese Foreign Ministry say, "Well, it's completely unacceptable for the United States to engage in this kind of advocacy for a Chinese citizen and to smuggle him, how do they put it, smuggle him through illicit means into the embassy." Well, the Chinese government is trying to feign a position of, they're the injured party in all this.
Let me go back to that,
what's
John.
happened, yeah.
This is Will Kane, by the way. You've said two things that really interest me at this point. So let me ask a really basic and maybe even cynical question at this point. There are human rights atrocities going on across this world. I don't have to look very far to see ones the United States is not involving itself in. For example, in Syria, where 9,000 people are dying, and for some reason, and these are happening all across the world, by the way, for strategic reasons mostly, we don't get involved. Tell me this, why, you just said that these economic talks we were going to have with China were important, the strategic and economic summit we're going to have with them. So why should this have interfered? Why was this Chen Guangcheng case so important for us to get involved in?
Well, I think it wasn't that. This is what I was trying to say at the beginning, is it strikes me that the embassy was not fully coordinating with the State Department. The embassy had its full attention, as you could tell from the ambassador right on down, had its full attention on this case. Meanwhile, we've got the Assistant Secretary of State, and followed by the Secretary of State, accompanied by the Secretary of Treasury, accompanied by half a dozen senior cabinet people, including undersecretaries of defense and senior generals, coming to focus on something else. And of course, everybody's attention then winds up getting focused on the asylum case. I think, yeah, I mean, the question is, why did we allow this to happen? And I think the answer is, well, one has to look at a lot of exogenous forces here, and I have a feeling that the Chinese saw what was happening, and the Chinese government was actually forcibly sort of pushing people's attention onto the Chen Guangcheng case in order to take the attention away from what they weren't giving away or what they weren't doing at the strategic and economic
Well, that's
dialogue.
something different than we've heard. Andrew?
Yeah. Hey,
Well,
John,
it is, yeah.
Andrew Wilkow
One
here.
of the things that one of the things that you really ought to pay attention to is the visit of the Chinese defense minister that happened just literally overnight, and it was announced 2 days ago. He's coming today, and I really do wonder what kind of a deal the U.S. has been pressured into because of this Chen Guangcheng thing.
I have a simple question here. You know, we here obviously sympathize with this activist's plight, especially on the pro-life issue, but one man's human rights activist is another man's terrorist. How long until the Chinese government starts to harbor a Bradley Manning or a blind sheikh or somebody that we've accused of things, that person asserts that what they're doing is just their human rights activity, and now all of a sudden they're being, I mean, we hear this all the time. We wouldn't like it if other countries did these things to us.
Well, imagine, imagine what would happen. I mean, at least at that point, then we could finally be. The problem is that does not challenge the legitimacy of the United States Constitution and the United States of America. What has happened here is that the Chinese government really looks at this as a matter of face or legitimacy, and since they're not a government, you know, by the consent of the governed, they have to have other grounds of legitimacy. And whenever you hold up to world scrutiny, and especially when you hold up to the scrutiny of the Chinese people, the utter bankruptcy of their own regime, that gets to the root of their own legitimacy.
So
now,
let me bring this
their
to
problem.
Let me bring this to the table. Ask you guys. Now we've heard from John now, and we have two narratives presented to us on this issue right now. The Chen Guangcheng case is a huge embarrassment to China. That this blind lawyer was able to escape his custody in some province in China and get to the American embassy. Right? That looks like very embarrassing details on its face to the Chinese government. Or, as John, I think, just forwarded, the Chinese government was actually somewhat complicit or encouraged this to distract from these summit strategic economic talks. Which one do you buy, Matt?
I think both are kind of legitimate. I can go both ways with this. I think both governments look pretty bad, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the U.S. government botched this. I think the Chinese government botched it as well. And I think they're working together to kind of just make it look so they didn't botch it as bad. My big question after listening to all the questions and answers that I've heard is, how does this affect the relationship between China and the United States, the two major powers of this world? Who comes out looking good? And does anybody have to take a step back and kind of give in to others? You know, and does this really move things forward or actually take us another step back in a already rocky relationship with China?
Well, look, I think that state is a huge bureaucracy. I know John was a state employee. I worked for another huge federal bureaucracy in my day. So the fact that they were caught unawares by something and did not react in an excellent way right off the bat is not surprising at all. I have to say, I think that it looks like they've recovered from the initial stumble, assuming this deal goes through pretty well. John, would you say that's a fair assessment of this, that all things being equal, the reaction we're getting right now in terms of what the U.S. is doing and how this thing might get settled is probably the best way that it could have been handled, or would you have pushed for something different?
Well, I would have tried to avoid keeping, well, look, the thing to remember is that one of the most brutal and authoritarian police chiefs in China has something very much in common with one of China's most active and gentle human rights activists. And that is, when they feel that their life is in danger, where do they go? You know, Police Chief Wang Lijun of Chongqing, he went to the nearest American consulate he could find and hid there until he could arrange his safety.
I'm with you on that, John. Still the shining city on the hill. So thank you.
I mean, so we come out looking better on this, I have to say, even despite the mess ups.
All right. Shining city on the hill, safest place in China. They said both things about the American embassy there in China. Hey, John, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with tonight's Island of Misfit Stories.
When you don't have arsenic in the food, it's impossible to build up a tolerance for it. You have to start small. You get arsenic going into the food. This will save 0.1% of our global budget, and I think we have to do this immediately. Get arsenic back in the food.
Have you ever seen The Princess Bride?
Exactly. That's
the
where...
hero, Wesley, built up an immunity to iocane powder.
Exactly.
How? By taking it little by little over a 5-year period of time until he was immune to iocane powder.
I'm Pat Gray, little at a time.
I approved of this. I approved of this
I think
message.
this is a solid character. I like him. We need somebody out there doing that, just
Look,
taking those positions.
Our children are too healthy. They need to breathe some sort of pollutants in the air because the air has been cleansed over time since the 1970s to a point where there's almost nothing in it. There's nothing to our air anymore.
We need to toughen up a little bit.
We need to toughen up our children by giving them some dirtier air.
Coming this year from Mercury Inc., President Obama calls his childhood mentor Frank, but he was so much more. A writer, an entrepreneur, an activist, and a full-fledged communist. Author Paul Kanger reveals the untold story of the communist who changed America forever. Then, a publishing first, a 10-part ebook thriller series released over the course of 1 year. From New York Times bestselling author Chris Stewart. By June, the battle will be raging, not for the Oval Office, but for our souls. It's time to find a new way forward. The Ultimate Voter's Guide from Glenn Beck. In the fall, we turn to entertainment with 2 groundbreaking sequels. First, the young adult thriller Michael Vey, Rise of the Elgin. And then, the long-awaited sequel to Glenn's smash hit novel, The Overton Window, finally arrives. It's a year of education, entertainment, enlightenment, and of course, the election. All coming this year from Glenn Beck and Mercury Inc.
You gotta fight for your right.
We're not just playing the Beastie Boys, sadly, just because it's a bunch of guys sitting around and we've lost the ladies tonight. MCA, right?
Yep,
Is that his
MCA.
name? One of the members of the Beastie Boys, MCA, died today. Cancer?
Cancer, yep.
Yeah, sad news. But it is Friday. It is our last chance to bring you the Island of Misfit Stories. We're going to get straight to it with Matt.
I'm going to fracking, which just sounds cool. It's a Friday. It kind of rhymes, I guess. I don't know. It starts with an FR. But,
Fracking Friday?
Fracking Friday. This is about, again, the U.S. setting new rules for fracking on federal land. If you don't know what fracking is, it's basically it's a technology of pulling natural gas out of shale. When there's shale everywhere, around here. I'm from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is full of it. North Dakota is full of it. Many areas, rural areas throughout this country where unemployment is very high. Well, areas that have this, unemployment is really dropped because all these new jobs coming in. But the Obama administration, for the last couple of months and even over a year, and even the EPA has been going after them, doing a 2-year study saying that it contaminates groundwater. Well, several other studies have come out and said it does not contaminate groundwater, no more than any other type of drilling for oil or natural gas in the United States. And what I'm trying to get at is the fact that the Obama administration continues to go after fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, coal, in light of pushing what? Green energy. And Andrew brought this up earlier, talking about green energy, pushing that. And yes, it's eventually going to move towards green energy if you regulate and fine and charge all of these fossil fuel companies so much money, they're going to be forced to shut down this fracking. And what ends up hurting our economy is because now we rely on foreign oil from areas that are not friendly to us, and you're costing tons of jobs. This is the future of our energy policy, and this once again shows Obama administration doesn't have an energy policy.
We talked about it at this table. It's an energy revolution, what's going on with shale gas and shale oil. Buck, what do you got?
A sheriff's deputy was fired because he was making inmates in a prison dance in order to use a microwave. He was accused of ordering...
Do we have video?
We do not have video.
Are they doing Thriller?
Well, actually, since you asked, Mr. Wilkow, I can tell you that they were forced to dance to Usher's Yeah.
Great song.
So,
Not familiar.
not familiar?
No.
Oh, come on.
Why don't you help me out?
If I may, all kidding aside for a second, this is pretty egregious stuff. I mean, when somebody's in custody, I think that it's very important. We've discussed this individual who was in the DEA custody for 4 days without food or water.
5 days.
Almost died, 5 days. almost died.
Drank his own urine.
This is very serious stuff, and I think a lot of Americans sort of turn a blind eye to what goes on.
You're comparing no food and water to having a dance?
No. I'm not comparing the two. I'm just saying this is an example, another thing where we should look at the treatment of prisoners in our society.
They were in jail for a reason. They did something wrong.
What is this, the Shawshank Redemption?
I think I'm with Joe Arpaio on this. I think it's okay to make them dance.
Yeah. Make them dance, use the microwave?
He makes them wear pink underwear.
Apparently the Internal Investigation Board that looked at it disagreed and fired him right away. So you gentlemen may think that all this is all well and good, but I have to say I think that it's very important that people are treated with a certain dignity and respect, even if they are in fact being held
and you choose to wear pink.
And I do choose to wear pink.
So are you.
And I own my pink. Thank you very much.
All right,
That's all
Andrew,
I got.
You're outnumbered at this table, this board, 3-1.
I'm not feeling the guy vibe. It's a Friday. We're at a wood table. That's water, and there's no wings. Okay, so something's wrong here.
So we need beers, you're saying?
Yes, we do. Mine is from CNN about Spirit Air about to charge $100 for carry-on bags. I don't know if you've seen this guy, Ben Baldanza, the CEO. He was called out about their denying of a Vietnam War veteran's cancellation of a flight because he has the type of cancer where you can't fly with the recirculated air. And he said, well, too bad. If we do this for him, everybody will want it. It'll be anarchy. And he basically told the guy, whatever. He's a jerk. They have the highest level of complaints of any airline, doubling the next nearest. You said the stock is doing well, but here's the free market approach that you guys are going to love. If you don't like Spirit Airlines, don't fly their aircraft. Go Delta or United or Continental, whoever's still around.
There are plenty of bankrupt, government-subsidized airlines for you to pick from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they
Bring
also
back the old
charge.
Pan Am.
The fees to fly Spirit Air are typically $100 to $200 cheaper than other larger competitors.
Yeah, they unbundle.
They
unbundle. You don't get dinner, you don't get drinks.
So you save a little money, but you add a little frustration.
But they're hitting you at the gate with the $100. That's the other thing. When you book online, you have the option of paying for your bags. It's $40 going to $50, but it's $100 at the gate if you forget. And again, don't fly it if you don't like it.
You won't have to fly it for my story. Here we are. This is a weekend story. This is a Friday story. All right, I want to ask you quickly, did any of you guys take vacations every year to kind of the same place? Did you have a regular vacation spot? Where was it?
My grandparents' apartment in Hollywood Beach, Florida.
Florida, and you're from up here?
Well, I was born in Florida, raised here, yeah.
Matt?
Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore, and you're from?
Philadelphia.
Grandparents' house, Dutchess County, New York.
Grandparents' house is in Dutchess County, and you grew up here in the city.
Yes.
All right, you guys are actually perfect. You fit the profile. You ever notice when you go on vacation, say you're in Florida, the Panhandle, Florida, you're like, everybody is from Chicago. Everybody on vacation. It's true. Everybody is from Chicago. Apparently, where you go on vacation is very, very regional. Like, if you're from Chicago, let's put up the chart. Most people in Chicago go down to the Florida Panhandle. You can see it there. They go to Destin. They go to Gulf Shores. Some of them go to Miami. Look at New York. Look where Andrew's from, and Matt, for that matter, and all three of you guys. Look, you
Long
largely
Island in Florida, right?
Long Island in Florida. If you're from Texas, I am. You went to Texas. You went to the hill country down around Austin, or you went over to Gulf Shores, Alabama. What they found is people like to travel, find their second vacation homes within about 300 miles of their home. About a 4-hour drive is ideal. Got to get to it often. Wow. So you guys fit the profile.
Shows that we're sheep. We just follow everybody else.
That and you hear that other people go there and you kind of just transplant yourself to familiar people.
Yeah, you take vacations in places where you'll see the same people.
Which is, why would you take the vacation then?
Right.
You were getting away from them. Yeah.
All right, that did it for the guys' show. I don't know when it will happen again.
I thought we were going to do it. Hey, there we go, in the middle.
Yeah, water on a Friday.
Boom.
We'll see you guys back here on Monday. Good night.